The RPG Cave's mana is fueled by patrons at patreon.com/YumiCapri, and we want to say thank you to everyone for all of their support. And we want to thank all of our patrons, including our Capremium producers, Dallas Ford, Drew Agnew from the House of Mario podcast, Jace Baldridge from twitch.tv/Baka Ridge, Lee Navarro, the fearless leader of the Phoenix Overdrive Extra Life team, and Jonathan Brown. You can find him over at youtube.com/GamingPurpleMonkey. Our platinum producers, Brian Scott, Robbie Bobby Miller, and Trucker Sloth. And our gold members, Argo, Brennan Myers, Dallas Robbins, Emily O'Kelly, Heather Boney, James Johnson, Joel Brooks, Jose Jimenez, Mac Time, Benji Kong, Marcus O'Neill, RJ Kern, Dano, Skinny Matt, Mr. and Mrs. Nasty Boots, Fulia Fuji, and Xavier Reyes. Thank you so much for all of your support. Now, on with the show. Greetings, fellow travelers. Welcome to the 8th level of the RPG Cave. I am your level 99 human archmage, and I'm joined by the level 99 elf ranger, Mr. Garret Bland. Garret, how are you doing on this wonderful Saturday afternoon?
I'm doing very well. The winds are howling. I got my silver and steel sword ready to go. I'm ready to go on the hunt on some monsters here.
I mean,
this episode.
Just make sure you use the correct sword, Garret, or else, bad things are to happen. You'll be like, why is this doing
correct
nothing?
Sword? Yeah, correct oils too. You got to make sure you're ready for this hunt.
So folks, in case you couldn't guess by Garrett's little intro there, we're talking all about The Witcher today. We're basically doing like a series retrospective, kind of like we did with Persona last week, all about The Witcher. But before we do that, of course, we should clear the dungeon of all those pesky mobs. Of course, if you want to support the show, if you like what we do, of course, you can support us for free if you don't have bucks to toss over on your podcast service of choice. Just leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, for example, and we'll read your message on the show. But otherwise, just subscribing definitely helps out the show and helps us get discovered as well. And it's been definitely helping the show get some traction because we've been seeing some good numbers for the show recently, which is awesome.
Awesome.
A lot of new listeners coming in over the last episode or two, Garret. So people seem to like those last 2 episodes we did. So there we go. Of course, you can also subscribe to us on YouTube. Just search for the RPG Cave on YouTube or go to the link in the show notes if you're listening to us on your audio feeds. Because yes, we post a video version of this podcast every single week on YouTube. So you can check us out there. Also, you can put a little tip in the old tip jar if you feel so inclined over at patreon.com/YumiCapri. You can get early access to the show as well as all of our other shows, as well as exclusive content, including something that Sean and I are going to be recording right after this episode. We're going to do a piece of exclusive content for Patreon. So if you want to hear that, patreon.com/YumiCapri is how you do that. All right, Garret, let's read from the sacred texts. It's time to finally discuss The Witcher. Of course, this is a long-running series, but it's definitely not as long-running as the one we just talked about last week, which is Persona. Not nearly as many games in this series. We got less ground to cover with this episode, which in a way is a little bit of a good thing because maybe we can focus more on the game itself. So, of course, the original Witcher released on PC on October 30th, 2007. So, not too long ago. Yeah, it's like a 14-year-old game. We're almost at the 15-year anniversary of The Witcher, Garret, which is exciting.
Oh, cool.
The Witcher 2 Assassins of Kings released on PC on May 17th, 2011, although it eventually got an Xbox 360 release on April 17th, 2012 in the form of an enhanced edition with a bunch of extra content and stuff like that, which also came to PC on the same date as well. And then The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt came to PC, PS4, and Xbox One on May 19th, 2015, but then eventually 4 years later got a Switch port on October 15th, 2019. They said it couldn't be done, Garret. But they did it. They made The Witcher come to Switch, which was incredible.
They jammed it in there. They made a fog glasses version of it, but darn it, it does run on Switch.
I mean, it works. That's the main thing, right?
And it works.
Yeah, so that's what they were going for. So, of course, the Witcher series was based off a Polish book series written by the same name, that was written by Andrzej Sapkowski, who's actually a Polish author, that ran from 1990 until 2013 was when the last book came out in Poland.
Okay.
They eventually started translating the books into English, but that wasn't until the first game came out in 2007, which was interesting. Originally, there was a Witcher game being developed in 1996 by Polish developer Metropolis Software. Unfortunately, it was canceled, so it actually never saw the light of day. It was supposed to come to consoles as well as PC, but it just never made it out. So that was going to be like a PS1 game. Like, imagine a PS1 Witcher game, Garrett. Like, how crazy would that be?
Final Fantasy Polygon style Witcher game.
Yeah.
I would be down with that. See what that would look like.
Yeah, that would have been really cool to actually see the light of day. So I thought that was interesting. The original game was actually developed using BioWare's proprietary Aurora engine, which was used for games like Jade Empire, Knights of the Old Republic, and Neverwinter Nights. And it was the only third-party title to actually release with that engine, because all the rest of those games,
that's very interesting.
All the rest of the games that use that engine were BioWare games, especially. And in fact, if you actually picked up the original Witcher on PC, even though BioWare didn't publish or develop the game, their name's on the box because it uses their engine, which is really interesting to look at nowadays. Also, there was originally supposed to be an Xbox 360 re-release of the first game called The Witcher: Rise of the White Wolf, but it was ultimately canceled due to financial difficulties with the studio porting the game. Because I guess what ended up happening was they were porting the game, like they outsourced it, CD Projekt Red did, and the company that was developing just essentially ran out of money. So they ended up actually ended up canceling because CD Projekt Red just didn't put any more money into it, I guess. So there you go. Those are the quick facts about the Witcher series. But we should probably get into the discussion proper. So first off, Garrett, what was your first Witcher game, and kind of how did you get into the series?
So I am just a huge fanatic of one game in the Witcher series, and that is The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. It is probably, I would say it's arguably my favorite RPG, if not game, of that generation, of the PS4, Xbox One area. I got into the series total blindly in 2015. I got it for my birthday, actually, in July. And then I played it later that year. And then I remember them refreshing with some updates on the console, got better performance. And eventually I got through the game and its 2 expansions. I put in so many hours in Witcher 3. It was probably either doing schoolwork or playing this game for a good chunk of time. I love the gameplay mechanics of it, going through the loop, and it was a lot to do on the map. Right, there's so many question marks in Witcher 3.
Yep.
And I did every single one of them. I did all the side quests. I did every question mark, even including the 800 treasure chests that are out there on the map. I went there. I did every single one of them while I was listening to a podcast.
That's so much stuff, Garrett.
Yeah, it's by far like probably my biggest like undertake for a video game, other than Persona 5 maybe. But yeah, that's how I got into the series. I tried other games. I tried The Witcher 2 because we did get that for, I think, Xbox games for gold at one point.
Well, it was actually like a free game for like 6 months, I think. It wasn't even a games with gold game. They just gave it for free in the run up for the next game, essentially. Like that's when everyone got it for free. Yeah.
Oh, I remember that. Okay, yeah. I did play it for like maybe an hour, and I just can't stand the controls in Witcher 2 at all. Like, going from Witcher 3 to Witcher 3 is like totally backwards to me. It's not accessible to me. Like, I get Geralt and I get the characters, like, okay, that's cool, let me try to get into it. And then the combat, I just died every time, and I just couldn't figure it out. And I'm like, you know what? It's okay if I don't play this game. And then I observed Witcher 1 from afar. One of my good friends played it while I was playing Witcher 3. And yeah, that looks older to me than a 2007 game. That's why I was surprised when you said 2007.
Well, you have to remember, this goes back to what I was talking about too with the engine. Like, that engine was like an engine powering original Xbox games. Like, it was not like a 360 engine. So yeah, like it was a bit, I remember when it came out, like that was a big criticism for the game when it came out, was it wasn't like, because you have to remember, it came out the same year as BioShock, as a bunch of, as Halo 3, as a bunch of other amazing, 360 and PS3 games. So it was like, it was definitely like tougher to go back to a game like that for sure, visually.
Definitely hidden, yeah, for sure. But yeah, that's how I got into the series, Ryan.
Very nice,
with Witcher 3.
As for me, I actually played the original Witcher back in the day. I remember seeing a review for it on XPlay, of all places, because I used to watch that every single week on G4. And I remember them loving and kind of raving about The Witcher. And at the time, I was still kind of playing PC games at the time, but I was very much getting out of PC games. Because I played them more in the late 90s and early 2000s. So I remember picking it up on my PC, and it was an experience. Let me tell you what. Like it's a miracle I even played any of the games after that, because again, Geralt's character was interesting, but like the controls were not great. It did not play very well. It was really tough to play, especially coming from other console games that really did that better, and it also with the visual look, like you said, like it didn't really look great. The nice thing was it actually ran pretty well on older PCs. So if you had an older computer at the time, you didn't have to worry about having to have like the top of the line computer to play this game. So that was one nice aspect out of it. So that's where I got my start. I remember picking up Witcher 2 when it came to 360. Because again, I heard nothing but great things about it. So I was like, okay, I'll check this one out. I didn't buy it day one, but I bought it when it was on sale. I remember it was like $30 or whatever. So I was like, yeah, I'll do this. Yeah. And same as you, I just couldn't get into it for whatever reason. It was just like, whether it was the weird story at the beginning or the fact that it just felt clunky to play. Both those things,
it was so weird to play.
Yeah. And it wasn't nearly as refined as the third game. So I put that one down. Again, I didn't get very far in it. And then Witcher 3, I played it for about 50 hours and then kind of got bored of it. So I was enjoying it.
I can understand that.
Just other games kind of pulled me away from it. So it's the type of game I spent a lot of time with. And I definitely liked it more than the other two games. But it was just a matter of it was very tough for me to finish it. Especially with, again, how long it was.
I get it.
I just didn't fall down the rabbit hole in the same way you did, especially because there were other games out in 2015. And again, like around the time I was playing it, I was also playing Metal Gear Solid 5, which I was just enjoying so much more than The Witcher. So, I mean, I think that's part of the reason why I just never went back to it after spending so much time going around with it. But I did enjoy what I played of it. It's just, we just can't stick with it forever. So as far as where people should start with this series, first of all, obviously, we got a question from Seumas MacIsaac, so I wanted to bring him in first before we answer this. He asks, should people try to play the first two Witcher games, or should they skip right to 3? Seumas, just don't even bother going back to the first two games. I mean, they're fine. The stories are good in them, but, like, they're just so tough to go back to right now. Like
they're very hard to play.
I would not recommend it unless you really felt like you needed to, unless you were like a diehard Witcher fan and you felt you owed it to like the game series to maybe experience.
But you don't know if you're a Witcher fan if you haven't played the games. Yeah. So
if you haven't played them, definitely start with 3. 110%. Even though again, there's some story beats and stuff that kind of calls back to the earlier games that are going to totally go over your head. Doesn't matter. Don't go back and play the first. It really doesn't. Unless you have to.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of existing characters in Witcher 3, and you can tell that Geralt has past relationships with them, and that's the only thing that's missing. It's really, with Witcher 3, what's current, what's there, and they do a very good job of like doing adventures and everything with those characters without really needing any previous background for the first two games. So yeah, totally just start with Witcher 3 and see if you like it. See if you enjoy it.
Yeah, exactly. And again, if you're so won over by the end of it, you can go back and play Witcher 1 and 2, I guess. But like, no, I wouldn't do that unless you had to. So the Witcher itself, of course, has always been a third-person action role-playing game. In case y'all have never played it before, that stars Geralt of Rivia, who is a Witcher who basically is out there trained to basically hunt monsters. That's kind of his gig. That's how he makes his money, and that's how he kind of gets through this this dark fantasy world, essentially like that. And essentially, the 3 games kind of chronicle, Geralt going through this life in this fantasy world, killing these monsters, while also basically going through getting involved in some of these larger plots that happen in the event. Like in the first game, for example, towards the end of the game, he's involved in this kind of warring faction, like war between these 2 different factions, and he basically has to choose a side as to which side he wants to side with, or if he wants to be a neutral party, because the first game gave you an option to kind of be like the neutral Witcher option, essentially, did not really side with, either of the kingdoms and kind of just do your own thing at that point. But the canonical ending was, I can't remember the name of the kingdom, but he sides with one of the two kingdoms, essentially, is what ends up happening as the canonical ending to the first game.
I see.
But I really liked the idea that it gave you some choice there. Like, it didn't really force you to, pick one side or the other if you didn't want to. Because, again, Geralt, in a lot of ways, he's very much a neutral party when it comes to a lot of this stuff. Like, sometimes he'll get involved with the affairs of, a nation or two, but he's not like... He's not like a knight or anything like that. It's very different from a traditional RPG anyways, where maybe you're like more focused with like one particular faction that you play throughout the entire experience, or you're trying to save the world. Garrett's not out there to try and save the world. He just wants to make a buck or two.
Not really.
Right? So that's kind of his thing.
Right.
Or say Ciri, for example.
Yeah, I was. That's very interesting. So even in Witcher 1, that Geralt has the decision of these two factions or whatever, and I'm trying to think of another video game that really did that at the time for an action RPG, and it's really hard to think. I mean, you got Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, like way back when, but like other than that, dialogue and choice seems to be a more current or more updated mechanic nowadays versus 2007.
It was becoming more popular because, again, you had the BioWare games on the original Xbox, like Jade Empire and the KOTOR games that really gave you they really brought the choice system to bear, and then you started seeing a lot of imitators around the time that The Witcher came out. But it was really, but The Witcher 1 was, again, like to your point, I think it was one of the only ones that offered a neutral option, because Knights of the Old Republic, for example, gave you choices. But and there were neutral choices in there, so you could, in theory, skirt the middle. But at the end of the game, you had to pick one of two choices: whether the Sith win or you beat the Sith. Like there's no middle option, right? So KOTOR 2 did a better job, I think, of giving you the neutral option, but at the same time, you still really had to pick one of two choices at the end. Whereas Witcher, it had three choices, which again, you don't really see a lot in other choice-based games. But this was like during the rise of like every RPG needed choices at this point. And I see. And a lot of times they didn't really mean anything. But in The Witcher 1, it definitely meant something. Like it was the story like wildly changed depending on which one of the three choices you went with. Which again, really really interesting that it went in that direction. So with that, there was choices. You had choices in the second one as well, but it wasn't like you really just had a choice of one or two endings in The Witcher 2. And it was in the choices I didn't really feel like really meant anything in that game, at least from the section I played, because I didn't play the whole game. And then Witcher 3, Garrett, I think the choices actually go in interesting places in the third game.
There's a lot of deeper stuff. I mean, there's a lot of side endings too. Like there's an overall probably main ending to the main story, but then there's so many different endings with side characters who you romance with. Your relationship with Ciri, that's actually probably the biggest choice ending you have is your relationship with Ciri, who is I guess like your daughter in a way. Geralt treats her like a daughter, but that becomes a Witcher with you, and he kind of trains her to be a Witcher as well. So, but yeah, that's the only types of choices you have for those endings.
Yeah, for sure. So the story itself in Witcher 3 is amazing. And especially across all the three games, it's amazing. But even like one of the things I loved about the story in Witcher 3 in particular was like even the side quest stories were like really interesting. Like, like even if you went off the beaten path and went on some of the side quests, because you don't get that in a lot of games. Like a lot of games, especially like Assassin's Creed Valhalla comes to mind. Where as much as I liked the main story in that game, like if you go and do any of the side stories, it's like, come on, man, what are you even having me do here? Whereas The Witcher 3, like they had like some of the side stories had like arcs to them, and they had like a bunch of different storytelling motifs, and I loved playing the side missions in Witcher 3 because they were just so interesting, and I'm sure that's why you went like crazy with this game, right, Garrett?
Yeah, I wanted to do every single side quest with this game, including the treasure hunts and everything. I don't know, like you go through a side quest and you think it's the main quest because there's just so many layers behind these characters, behind these story arcs. And sometimes they get a little bit quirky, a little bit wacky, But most of the time, they do a very good job of exploring the world a little bit, sprinkling in some characters in there that complements with Geralt, and you get to make the decision on a lot of these side quests too. And so there's a lot of choice-based type of endings with these side quests, these side arcs.
Yeah, like and especially too, they affect the game in like weird and interesting ways too, which I thought was cool. So yeah, like if you make a certain choice, for example, it'll block you out of other side quests, for example, because it won't like continue the arc, which I thought was just, again, really, really, really cool. And again, something we started to see in games like Assassin's Creed Odyssey in particular, really borrowed a lot from The Witcher, and kind of tried to do the same thing with its side quests, which again, I don't think the stories are as interesting as The Witcher's, but I do think that they had like kind of similar ideas where you like choices you'd make in some of the side quests would even affect the main story, but also, you know, take you out of certain side quests later. So I thought the quest design in The Witcher really interesting. Although I will say though, with playing this game and even Witcher 2 to an extent as well, going to the map and then seeing a million question marks everywhere, it just it's harder to make the choice of like, where do I go? What do I do? Like it can feel a little bit overwhelming. And that's the one issue I've always kind of had with this series, and even with Cyberpunk to an extent, because I did also play Cyberpunk while it was, you know, broken, and I feel like it almost gave you too much choice in a lot of ways. Whereas like it was almost like the Netflix effect, where you could like scroll through it for hours, but like never actually start anything. That's how I felt sometimes playing The Witcher, which is, I think, part of the reason I also fell off with it. But again, very unique role-playing game in the sense that you had just so many quests littered everywhere. Like as far as the eye could see, you could really just go do anything you kind of wanted to, which was pretty cool. But we should talk a little bit more about the mechanics with The Witcher and kind of what makes the Witcher unique from other RPGs, because it's not just the story and quest system that makes The Witcher unique, but it has a lot of really unique mechanics. So I'm going to start with this question from Mike at BlazeKnight0923, and he asks, what is it that sets this series apart from its contemporaries? So as far as the combat is concerned, what's interesting about the combat in The Witcher is just how much it relies on like alchemy in combat.
Yes.
And as well as, you know, weaving different signs and stuff like that for your different magical attacks. Like the way the combat plays out is not just your standard action game.
Definitely. So I argue this a lot in The Witcher 3. It's probably the least RPG you really play, just because there are levels, but it's so, it doesn't really impact your combat so much. It's just sprinkles in maybe a little bit of skills here and there, but it really doesn't like change the way you play the game or anything like that. Mainly what you do in combat with a lot of these monsters, they have strengths and weaknesses, and you're gonna have to figure out what are their strengths and weaknesses in terms of magic, in terms of oil-based type of products on your swords, what kind of sword you're gonna actually use, either like for magical or undead creatures, you'll use, I think you use the silver sword for that. Yeah. Beasts, you use the silver sword, and then steel swords for more like humans and stuff like that. Basically you have to think about all these different mechanics, and it makes the user less automatic to play the game. You have to make sure you got the right things in order to defeat them in combat, because if you don't pay attention, even like a level 2 little monster will destroy you. And so, you gotta have to think on your toes a little bit more, less than a lot of other grindy RPGs that seem to be automatic most of the time.
Well, and what that really reminded me of is games like Dark Souls, for example, because in Dark Souls, you really need kind of like, one of the things that makes Dark Souls easier as you play it is like you learning that like the strengths and weaknesses of the enemies you're fighting, and making sure you bring in like the right weapon set, the right, you know, tools to kind of combat that enemy. And The Witcher was very much about that too, especially like from the first Griffin fight you fight early in the game. That game teaches you to make sure to kind of investigate the enemy that you're going to go up against, kind of learn more about it, so that you know when you fight it, you know, what you need to do in order to try and tackle that enemy. Like that's what I found more than anything is, well, it encouraged you to learn more about the enemies you're fighting so you could figure out their strengths and weaknesses. Because yeah, like you said, a level 2 enemy, if you're like near max level, can kill you if you're not paying attention or if you just, bring the wrong tools to bear against it.
Yeah, I want to say one more thing about the combat, and a lot of people, it doesn't really bother me, but a lot of people think it as a downside or a little bit of a negative or a critic, is the actual execution of the sword fighting itself seems to be it can be a little clunky.
Yeah,
even in Witcher 3, the most refined combat. You basically have like 2 types of attacks. You got a strong attack and a short attack, and you could do like chains of those. But the execution of it's slow. It's delayed sometimes. It feels very not like, in execution like Dark Souls or anything like that. Yeah. This game definitely relies on, okay, you pick the right oil, you pick the right magic to face this monster. If you just press some buttons, you'll probably be fine beating this monster. So it's not really too, I don't know how to say it, like articulate or meticulous with its sword fighting. Yeah,
like clunky is definitely the word I would have used as well to describe the sword combat. Like it doesn't feel as slow or as heavy as something like the Souls-like games are, but it does definitely feel not as smooth as other like action games that you'll play. It doesn't feel as smooth even as something like Assassin's Creed does, where I feel like the combat in that game just feels so much more refined than in something like The Witcher. Whereas The Witcher, again, meant to be kind of like a slower paced experience anyways, and it relies more, like you said, on your oils or picking the correct magic attacks and whatnot. So rather than beating your enemy down with the sword. However, I will say the combat in Witcher 3 way better than the first 2 games, because in the first game in particular, first of all, the first game is like kind of like an isometric game. You can play it in third person, but like in third person over the shoulder, but it really limits your ability to look around the environment and as well to fight some of the enemies. And that game just, again, it's strategic in the same way that Witcher 3 is, where you're still, picking out oils for your weapons or, picking out the correct magic attacks and using alchemy correctly. But the combat just feels... It just doesn't feel fun to play at all.
It's so slow.
It's a very slow moving game. And then Witcher 2 improved it, but it still just felt even like clunkier than Witcher 3 was to play. Like I don't like to bag on games for bad combat, but man, you really feel it when you go back to Witcher 2. It does not. The combat itself is definitely not the focus in that game in particular either. Like it really wasn't until Witcher 3 where I think the combat got in a state where I think it really needed to be in kind of from the very beginning. And I almost wish that the older games, like maybe with Witcher 1, I think it might have actually worked better as a turn-based game where, or even something honestly, like Dragon Age, where like if you just had him
that's
like
true.
Geralt like auto attack and then you kind of pick commands from a menu, I think it might have actually worked a little bit better.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, especially going with that engine too, because it was very much like the KOTOR engine. So like, if it played like KOTOR, it might have actually worked better, I think, or maybe it actually would have stood the test of time a little bit better. So I know that's part of the reason why like I say those games are hard to go back to, not just the visuals from Witcher 1 in particular, but also just the gameplay. It's real rough. But those are some of the things that make it mechanically different from other games, other RPGs out there, other action RPGs in particular. Like it feels very unique, both from the storytelling, but also the combat as well. Like we don't see a lot of games like this except for some of the Souls-like games, but then they take it to like another extreme. But otherwise, I think it actually feels pretty cool to play anyways. So the mechanics in the Witcher games, though, beyond that, there's not too much to say about that. Again, it's just your standard open world, go from place to place kind of thing. You don't really, in this game, I didn't really find you had to worry about money too much, which was nice.
No, you don't.
Yeah, you kind of had it was one of the, because I remember we got a question a couple weeks ago about does currency actually matter in RPGs? And the currency doesn't matter in The Witcher when you play that game.
I like, I'm glad you mentioned that. I like the crafting element into Witcher 3 as well, because there's a lot of different materials you're going to have to pick up in order to make different swords. You can upgrade those swords and armor as well. They have a deep very deep mechanic on that side. And then there's like, I think there's like these gems that help out the weapons and armor as well. I can't recall, but I think there is a side crafting element in that case. And I remember just spending hours and hours just figuring out what's the best set for me. And also, if you have a matching set, that really helps out too. So it has like beneficials from that. And then there's a lot of, I know Witcher, gosh, what are they called? They're like clans, right? Like different Witcher clans. And each clan has their own set of armor and weapons. And I remember just trying to like literally make all the armor and weapons so I can have all the different kind of beneficials. One was like a bear, where it's like it was slow, but you're very strong, like tank-like. And then there was like a cunning fox or something like that, where you could be very fast and very sneaky. So yeah, it was actually pretty good on the crafting side.
Yeah,
for sure.
like more than anything, that's like kind of the currency is the crafting, versus just the gold that you make, where it's like it exists, but it's there, but it's not like a central part of the gameplay mechanics. So yeah, like it's got a big crafting element, which I think is pretty cool. So I have a question for you, Garrett, and this comes to us from the Winter Gamer, and I know you're probably the better person to field this question than me.
Yeah.
What are some of the best side quests to do in The Witcher 3? Do you have any memorable side quests that kind of stand out to you as like the best ones to go do, Garrett?
So yeah, it's been a while since I played Witcher 3, so I don't have like a huge side quest to like, hey, you need to play this side quest in Witcher 3. I remember one of them was like you go through these like brawler events like throughout the map. Like each kind of like major town has like face the champion of this brawler kind of like punch to punch combat. And then the final boss of that brawler email or the quest chain is in Skellige Island. And the major boss, you don't know what it is. You think it's human because all you were facing was humans. No, it was a rock troll that was like wasn't dumb or anything, was like the champion and like had some form of intelligence, and you had to beat him, and it was like so impossible because he's a rock troll, like he trying to punch rocks, like come on. I remember doing that. Another one that really spoke out to me was actually one in the expansions, the Blood and Wine expansion. This side quest was very elusive. It was one of the more elusive side quests I've ever like encountered. It's not on a quest board or anything. You have to like kind of encounter it on the map itself. There's no question mark to it at all. And it's basically this monk. And it's actually kind of noticeable from just the landmarks, because it's like trees and a ring and then like a land, like a moat, and then like a little island in the middle. So I went straight into the middle of that, and you find this monk, and he gives you certain tasks to do, and then once you're done with that task, you get the best silver sword in the game. And it was actually pretty cool how the cutscenes go, and it was very magical and everything. I think that was one of the more surprising side quests I went on. Other than the side quests that I really want to touch on is Gwent.
Yep, I was actually just about to bring that up as well. So how much Gwent did you play, Garrett?
I played too much. Probably a third of the game was me playing Gwent.
Yeah. Well, especially if you did all the side quests, like you would have had to, right? Like it would have been impossible to do them without playing that much Gwent, I think.
Right. So Gwent is the side card game in Witcher 3. They did spin it off into its own video game. It's free to play, similar to like Hearthstone and stuff. Basically, the combat of Gwent is you have three rows. You got the siege, cavalry, and then the infantry. And you'll have cards in your hands, and then every turn you can put in like a card down, and like you'll add up points basically when you put in cards onto the board. But you got to be very careful with your opponent, because if you put too much cards on the first round, you may not have enough cards for the second round, so you might be beaten 2 out of 3 times. So that was kind of the combat in Gwent, and it got really deep in Witcher 3.
Yeah.
And they changed it up in the spin-off.
Well, they would have had to, just because, again, it wasn't as deep as they needed it to kind of be its own game, I think.
Right.
Especially, too, because it wasn't on the level of, like, other card games. Like you talked about, like, Hearthstone or Magic the Gathering or Pokemon. Like, it was, like, more simple than that in the game. So that's why they kind of had to expand it and add more cards. And I think they're still adding cards to Gwent, Garrett. It just never ends with that game.
Yeah. So I think I collected all the, well, no, I didn't collect all the cards because the trophy didn't pop up. I think I missed some actually throughout my thing. I think I remember there's one huge, I think it's a side quest with a dandelion. You're actually kind of disguised in a royal party or whatever. And there's a couple of Gwent matches in there that are pretty difficult. They're pretty complicated. But once you beat those, you'll get the cards over there, but I did not beat them, and I decided to just go with the cutscene, and yeah, it was sad, but I got most of the cards in Witcher 3.
Almost. One day you'll go back and get all those. It's like collecting the triple triad cards in like Final Fantasy VIII or something like that.
Exactly.
You don't understand that reference probably because you haven't played those games, Garrett, but you know.
No.
Actually, like, yeah, from like Final Fantasy VIII until 12, they had like a new card game in every single Final Fantasy game, and they were always terrible. So people still like them, I guess, but like I've never really been into them. So that's why like
Final Fantasy. No, go for it. Sorry.
I was just gonna say it's like it was really interesting with The Witcher that there was a card game in it that really got so popular it became its own thing. Like I think it's really cool just thinking about Gwent in general because like even though I really didn't get hooked by Gwent, I love and appreciate the fact that they saw enough of a critical response from people being really excited about Gwent to actually want to play, Gwent as its own game, which I thought that was really cool. Because again, you don't really see that from other RPGs. Like there's a lot of card games in RPGs, but they never really get spun off, and they never become popular enough to get spun off into their own game. Like, have you ever played Pazak in Knights of the Republic, Garrett?
Nope.
Oh man.
Or was it Caravan in Final Fantasy, or not Fallout New Vegas?
Yeah, that's another one too.
So,
oh man, we could do a whole episode on just card games and RPGs, Garrett.
I'm down with that.
We're not gonna do that.
I bought, so I did get, here's my original copy of Witcher 3 Wild Hunt for PS4. It comes with a lot of good stuff. CD Projekt Red does a very good job of packing in all the cool content in there. So it says it includes in a compendium, a world map, a soundtrack, and some stickers. I remember putting a sticker on my laptop. Then I got the Gwent limited edition sets that came with the expansion. So the first one was the Hearts of Stone Gwent set. It gives you first you get the Scoia'tael and the Monsters deck cards for this one, and you get the gems and everything in this. It's still packed in together. And then you get I got the Witcher Blood and Wine expansion, and that includes that one's Skellige, and then the other one I forgot, Novigrad, I think. Yeah. So yeah, they became real cards, and I got all of them. I think there's extra cards in the expansions, but yeah, I'm really glad I got these because I think they are pretty hard to get these days.
Yeah, especially because I don't think it came, because obviously it didn't come with every version of the game, and they only made so many of them too. Especially the expansion ones in particular. I don't think they made too many of those physically anyways, because they started just releasing the complete edition of the game, and I think that's the only version you can really pick up now. And it doesn't really come with all the extra stuff. And then you got your Switch copy.
I did get a Switch copy. I needed to get one. I got it on sale though for like, I think it's going down for like $30 or something, but it comes with everything on the PS4, the compendium, world map, soundtrack. Like they put everything in the Switch as well. They put all the DLC and the game in cart too, so you don't have to like download outside of it. And the biggest thing I think with this game, with the Switch version, it's the only game that does cross save with the PC version. And so you can connect your GOG account to the Switch version, and it automatically uploads saves to your PC version, so you can switch between those.
Which is awesome. The only downside is you have to have played the game on GOG, Garrett.
That's true. You would have had to get the game on GOG. I do have the game on GOG because I like to support CD Projekt Red.
You own like almost every copy of The Witcher guy. Where's your Xbox One copy of it? That's really the only one you're probably missing.
It probably is digital somewhere.
Oh, geez. So, needless to say, we're going to ask the question, but I mean, we both have the same answer for it because we have to ask this whenever we talk about any series. Favorite game in the series. obviously it's The Witcher 3. Please, like it's not.
It is The Witcher 3.
It's not going to be the other two games. I mean, yeah, it's the one you should start with. It's the best one. So I mean, it's, in a lot of ways, it's kind of the only one that really kind of matters in a lot of ways to us, anyways, in our hearts.
Right, Ryan. Do you know the other side game that is in the Witcher series other than Gwent?
Thronebreaker.
Thronebreaker. I do have that.
Yeah, that's a MOBA, I think, right?
No, it's not. It's a card game. It's Gwent.
That's right. I was thinking of a different one because there is another Witcher game beyond that, which is a MOBA for mobile.
Oh.
That's what I was thinking.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
I do have that on Switch. I did play it for maybe 5 hours or so, and I had to stop. It's okay. It's like an isometric top-down kind of controlling, and you like go around this 2D map, and there's a bunch of quests and stuff like that. But the main combat in that game is Gwent, but it's not what you think it is. It's like Gwent, you can make up your own cards and like put them together and like play the game, right? Mm-hmm. In this game, you have set specific situations of Gwent, where it's more like puzzle-like. Like, okay, defeat this guy in 3 turns, or defeat this guy in like 7 turns, and here's some bonus objectives, like beat him in 2 turns with this card, or something along the lines of that. I only played it for 5 hours just because actually the way you play Gwent in that game, it was actually really difficult. It's very one-minded, right? There's only one strategy. You go through this puzzle and you'll figure out the puzzle. So it's more like a puzzle card game than actually Gwent. But yeah, Thronebreaker, I would not again, play Witcher 3 to get like the breadth of Witcher experience. But Thronebreaker, if you're done with Witcher 3 and you love Gwent, that's probably another game to check out.
Yeah, if you like cards, honestly, I think that's probably a good recommendation in particular, because Gwent's a good card game. So if you like card games, then I think you're going to dig that as well. So there you go.
For sure.
That's our conversation about The Witcher. But Garrett, we have one question from the audience, and it's the same question.
What is it?
We've been doing for the last couple of weeks. From the Winter Gamer continued.
Yes.
What is your favorite RPG from every gaming system, both console and handheld? So Garrett, I decided this week we're going to do Xbox 360, PS3, Wii, Wii-U, 3DS, and then Vita. And then kind of on next week's episode, we're going to basically finish this question by basically talking about current gen. So it's almost over with Winter Gamer. We're almost there. So
we're almost there.
We're to go back and forth, because I know, Garrett, you've actually probably played most of these platforms. So rather than me kind of rattle off a bunch of stuff like last week, we'll go back and forth. So Xbox 360, for me, Mass Effect 2 is probably my favorite Xbox 360 game in general. Well, actually, I don't have to say probably. I did an entire Xbox 360 list for the Xbox Drive, and that was my number one pick, was Mass Effect 2. So honestly, if you had to ask me what my favorite RPG is on Xbox 360, it's Mass Effect 2. I loved everything about that game. I mean, I could cheat and just say the Mass Effect trilogy, but that would be cheating, Garrett. And Mass Effect 1 just doesn't hold up as well with that version. Whereas if I was to throw the Legendary Edition in there, maybe I would say maybe Mass Effect 1 over Mass Effect 2. But it was the best mix of story and gameplay across all 3 of the Mass Effect games. And I just love the final sequence in that game. The suicide mission, I think, is incredible. One of the best sequences in almost any video game I've ever played. So I really love Mass Effect 2. It was a really special game to me, and I loved every minute of it. What about you, Garrett? What's your favorite Xbox 360 RPG?
I think you probably know this one, too. You probably can guess it.
The Witcher 2 is Assassins of Kings.
Of course. Yes, you got it. No. It is The Elder Scrolls Skyrim.
Yeah.
Is probably one of my favorite RPGs of all time. I played that thing so much. And the funny thing with the 360 version and the PS3 version, I heard it was crap. But
well, if you
with
collected
my
too many
360
cheese wheels,
version,
it broke the game, Garrett. That was the problem.
Apparently. Same thing for me. It got to the point on 2 playthroughs, I think I was like very close to like highest level, where my save got corrupted. And they're like, hey, save got corrupted. You got to restart the game. I'm like,
oh, no.
Well, I'm just dying inside right now.
Yeah. That's always the best feeling. Get 200 hours into the game and the save just dies and you have to start over.
Yeah, and you're just looking at the screen just blankly like, really? Okay, I think I'm good with this game.
Yeah.
But yeah, Skyrim for sure is my favorite in the 360. We're going to go through the Elder Scrolls. I'm sure we'll have a Skyrim episode, but it's just one of the first games that exploration-wise, going anywhere you want, and there's just so much life in this land, in this world, and you can do whatever you want, and you can basically be any class, and it just felt the most free to me in a long time in the year of 2011, 2012. So, yeah, it was a really good game.
Very nice. So I mean, and we'll definitely be talking about Skyrim at some point, Garrett. Like that's kind of a given. So let's move on to PS3, which again, your answer might be the same, although it's probably hard to pick Skyrim for PS3 just because, again, like
how
terribly it runs. But I'm gonna go with, even though Mass Effect 2 came out on PS3, I played it on 360, so I'm gonna go with a different game for PS3, and I'm gonna go with Tales of Xillia is probably my favorite PS3 RPG. It's a fantastic RPG, of course, in the long-running Tales series, with some incredible characters, a great story, and just fantastic visuals. It was the first time they actually brought UFO Table on deck to do the animation and character design for the Tales series. Of course, UFO Table, one of the best Japanese studios out there as far as animation, especially with action scenes. They craft incredible action scenes. Having them in the game was awesome, and it was like definitely the highlight of the Tales series for me personally. It's one of, if not the best game in the series. So Tales of Xillia, definitely my favorite PS3 JRPG, and especially it was exclusive to that console, and it also got a sequel, which is also really excellent that I know a lot of people really missed. What about you, Garrett? What's your favorite PS3 RPG? Is it going to change? Is it Skyrim? Is it something else?
I would not recommend Skyrim on PS3 version. Play any other version. Like the Switch version is pretty good too. Mm-hmm. I did not have a PS3. I did not play PS3 at all. So it's very hard for me to recommend an RPG for PS3. I think really the only PS3 games I did play was like PlayStation All-Stars, Battle Royale, right? And then what else? Like some certain exclusives, but like, of course, on Vita too. Odin Sphere. I played that on Vita. Maybe that's very good on PS3, right? That's very, very solid. But that was Vanillaware.
That was on PS4 as well. I consider like that remake of Odin Sphere more of a PS4 game. Just like Persona 5. In theory, Persona 5 is technically a PS3
That's true.
But like,
true.
Did either of us play that version? Probably not, right? So
no one did.
Maybe I should go play that version of the game because I could get more Persona trophies.
Just to see what it looks like. My gosh, of course.
Yeah, of course. All right, well, let's move on to Wii, because I think Wii was an interesting console. Mm-hmm. It had some interesting RPGs.
It did.
For me, the one I'm actually going to go with, which is actually a bit of a odd choice, is Sakura Wars So Long My Love, which was actually another Japanese game, another weird game, of course. This took place in like this older version of New York, but it is like a steampunk game with mechs and stuff.
Interesting.
I really liked the Sakura Wars games later, because actually I didn't get a chance to play them until the newest one on PS4 came out, because they did a reboot of Sakura Wars.
Right.
I think it was last year or the year before. But I remember, like, after I played that one, I went back and played the older games. And most of them, unfortunately, didn't get localized here. But luckily, I have a Sega Saturn. So I was able to play some of the older Sakura Wars games with translation patches. And really dug them. And Sakura Wars So Long My Love on the Wii was actually a really good RPG. And I know that there were a lot of really good RPGs on Wii, despite the fact that, they were a little bit harder to find because there was so much shovelware on the Wii. But this one just really stood out to me as far as RPGs on the Wii. So I have to go with that one. Although, again, there's a couple honorable mentions I'll get to after you see your pick, because you might pick one of these, and I don't want to steal the spotlight from you. So what was your favorite Wii RPG, Garrett? Or did you even have a Wii? I can't remember. I don't think we ever talked about the Wii.
I did have a Wii. All right, I am an actual gamer. I had some consoles. I got it specifically for Smash Brothers, really.
Of course.
But I did play some RPGs on Wii itself. But the game that really sticks out in my head all the time is what I actually played last year on the Switch, and that's Xenoblade Chronicles.
Yeah.
Definitive Edition. I'm sure the original Wii one was pretty solid as well.
Yeah, it's good. I've played it.
Yeah. So I really, really enjoy playing that game. It's one of the best RPG stories I've really gotten into, and it's very, and the characters are very complementary one another. Combat, not like the best in the world, but very solid. And I like the world building in that game for sure. Don't play this game on 3DS. It looks like a pixelated mess.
Yeah. And again, the Wii version's fine. So just play it on Wii if you have a Wii or Switch, obviously play it there. The other two, this was actually like part of a trifecta of games that came out all around the same time. Pandora's Tower and The Last Story were both really excellent Wii RPGs, and they're probably kind of my honorable mentions beyond Xenoblade. It's like all three of those were like really good Wii RPGs that just didn't get localized here until like after just a bunch of fans really came together to kind of show Nintendo that we wanted these games, so they actually ended up localizing them. Of all the Wii RPGs, they're those are probably the four best. Wii U, Garrett, we pretty much have like two choices unless you want to count Mass Effect 3. But which one of the two, before I go, I'm going to give you the floor on this one. What was your favorite Wii U RPG? Of which one of the two are you going to pick?
Well, I didn't have a Wii U. I think the only game I've really played in Extreme Links in terms of RPG for Wii U is Xenoblade Chronicles X.
Yeah.
So I'll just go with that. What was the other choice again?
Tokyo Mirage Sessions, #FE.
Oh.
Yeah.
I need to play that. It is on. I have it on my Switch. It's in my backlog.
Yeah.
I will get to it. I'm sure that would take over Xenoblade Chronicles.
And honestly,
X.
that one's my favorite because it's a Shin Megami Tensei game through and through.
Yes.
That just happens to have characters from Fire Emblem in it, essentially. So if you like the Shin Megami Tensei,
that sounds like
games,
the best.
Yeah, like just imagine a J-pop version of Shin Megami Tensei, and that's what this game has. So. Yeah.
You just put this on my short list. I am playing Monster Hunter Stories 2 right now on Switch. I'm playing Final Fantasy VII Classic on Switch. This has got to be one of my next JRPGs I'm playing.
God, this show is just so crippling to your backlog, Garrett. Every time we talk about RPGs, you're just like, oh my God, I need all of these games.
Yeah, pretty much.
All right, 3DS. This is going to be a bloodbath. There were so many good RPGs on 3DS that it's tough to pick one.
So many.
Honestly, and this one is a bit of a controversial choice, I think. But I'm going to go with Bravely Default. It's probably my favorite. And I say controversial choice because it was a really solid game until you got towards the end of the game, and then I know a lot of people really just fell off with it. But I actually kind of liked that about the game. I actually kind of liked the back half of Bravely Default, and it really just reminded me of playing all of the old Final Fantasy games that I loved back on the Super Nintendo or PlayStation. Like it really felt like one of those games, and that's one of the reasons I really loved Bravely Default so much. Was it really reminded me of the Square Enix games that I loved, and it wasn't really until we got stuff like Octopath Traveler or other games, other newer Square Enix games, where I was like starting to see like Square Enix kind of is actually back to kind of where I wanted them to be back in the day. So yeah, Bravely Default was a game I played to death. I loved it from the story to the characters to, again, the combat was so cool and awesome, and very cool. Deep combat as well. Like the Bravely system was just really interesting. So Bravely Default is probably my pick for 3DS. Again, there's so many choices on this system though. Like it's hard to pick just one. What about you, Garrett? I'm gonna make you pick. Do Sophie's choice here. What's your favorite RPG on 3DS?
So Bravely Default is a very solid choice. So no knock against you. It's a very good game. I did not finish it as the reason as that you mentioned. So, but it is a very, very solid RPG. The game that pops in my head, it's a gut reaction. I'm sure I played better-ish RPGs, but the gut reaction that got me into the Fire Emblem franchise is Fire Emblem Awakening.
Yeah.
That is my favorite JRPG on the 3DS and RPG in general. I loved how accessible it was at the time as well. It came out, I think, 2014 or something like that. The Fire Emblem games before then had a lot of. It was on the mainline consoles. It had permadeath. It kind of like was inherently more difficult to do. Awakening was probably one of the first, well, it is the first Fire Emblem game that made it more accessible to other players. You don't have permadeath anymore. There was many different classes to choose from. They introduced the children mechanic where you romance certain characters, and then there's time traveling happening, and you bring your kids over, and they have inherited skills from the parents, and it actually became very deep and complex because you got mixtures of, they had to make kids for all the different combinations of couples in the game itself. The story of this game is probably my favorite in the Fire Emblem franchise. I've played Awakening up until now, all those games. I still need to go back to the older Fire Emblem games for sure. Hopefully they remake them on Switch.
One day,
but yeah, one day. Yeah. I'm sure they're remaking the Fire Emblem game right now.
But to be fair, like the remake we got on 3DS, like Fire Emblem Echoes, was also fantastic. Like we got
it was so good.
We got 3 really solid Fire Emblem games on 3DS with Awakening and Echoes and Fates. Like all 3 were amazing.
Yes.
So
yes.
Yeah, like Fire Emblem was a series that really exploded on 3DS, and that's why it was so hard to choose just one game, because you got those, you got the Shin Megami Tensei games, you got Persona Q. There's just so many choices for RPGs.
Yeah,
on 3DS.
Dragon Quest. Yeah, the Dragon Quest games on there.
Yeah.
So yeah,
it's too much. Not to mention like even the ones that didn't get localized, like Tales of Innocence and stuff like that were just Japan only. So yeah, I think 3DS, really awesome platform. Vita, on the other hand, Garrett, also really good for RPGs, but I think
very good.
There's probably only one choice for us to pick the top choice.
It really is. And not to knock against other RPGs, it's just this one is probably the pinnacle of RPGs in Vita, and that's Persona 4 Golden. Yeah. For sure.
110% agree with you. Like it's almost unfair to the other RPGs.
It really is.
Because again, just Persona 4 was like a really groundbreaking game, and just the Golden version is just, oh man, it just kills it. It's one of the best RPGs of all time. And honestly, it's easily Vita's best RPG. My runner-ups would actually be Tales of Hearts and Tales of Innocence.
Yes.
Tales of Innocence didn't get a North American release, but you can play it through translation patches, which is that game's really incredible. But it doesn't stand up to Persona 4 Golden, unfortunately. So that's probably the default choice. What about you? Do you have any runner-ups for Vita, maybe, Garrett?
I'm trying to think in my head right now, other Vita games that I've played. I played smaller indie games on there for sure. I mean, Child of Light is, there's like games, RPGs that are on Vita, but is in other platforms as well, but probably play best on Vita. Yeah. And to be honest with you, Child of Light is a very solid indie turn-based RPG from Ubisoft. There's a lot of side JRPGs that came out on the Vita, came on PS3 and PS4 as well, that like Trails of Cold Steel. I played some of that.
You had the Atelier games. You also had like
Atelier games.
You had Undertale.
Ys 8. Yeah.
There were a lot of
I did play Ys Origins for a long time as well. But yeah, and then there's a lot of like smaller Vita JRPGs that you just would not see in other systems that are localized for the US. So it's a good plug-in if you want to try any Idea Factory games or anything along the lines of that.
Or all the Vanillaware games that were on there, like you had
Vanillaware games,
Odin's Sphere, Dragon's Crown, like they're also all incredible on Vita. So again, the Vita had a lot of incredible games. It was just like none of them really matched up to Persona, which I guess is just why
Disgaea.
It was a slam dunk. Yeah, Disgaea as well. Yeah, just so many of those. So those are our choices for all those handhelds. Garrett, we're almost through the handheld and console list. Now, real talk before we go, what's your favorite N-Gage RPG, Garrett?
What is that?
You don't know what the N-Gage is? The N-Gage was a phone and portable game console in one, where it had like you played all the games using your 9-digit phone pad, and it looked kind of like a taco. It's incredible. It came out around this time. To be fair, there was only one RPG on the console, and that was a port of the Elder Scrolls 4. They did this like really terrible port of the Elder Scrolls. It's really bad. But it was a Nokia like phone that was marketed as a game console, a portable game console.
Oh goodness!
Yeah,
actually, there is a new phone that came out. I think it's from Asus or something along the lines of that. They're trying to tout the gaming phone now, because we got these side controllers that connect to our phones now. We got Game Pass, and we got these mobile games that are getting pretty elaborate. And like there are exclusive mobile RPGs.
Yeah. There are also a ton of re-releases of older RPGs on mobile too.
Yeah. So don't count them out.
Well, again, we're saving mobile for next episode, Garrett, because we will talk about mobile because it is technically a gaming system. But we also didn't talk about the CDI, Garrett. Like, we don't have a favorite RPG on CDI. We didn't talk about the Amiga.
Legend of Zelda.
We didn't talk about the Amiga CD32. We didn't. Of course not. We didn't talk about the Neo Geo, which didn't have any RPGs anyways. Just so many consoles we're missing. Atari Lynx. What's our favorite Atari Lynx RPG or TurboGrafx 16 RPG? Although TurboGrafx 16, I guess you could actually say Ys for that one, book 1 and 2. That's where Ys actually debuted, was TurboGrafx 16. So there you go.
I thought it was a PC. Okay.
There you go, Winter Gamer. We gave you some stuff there. We gave you some games. All right, before we go, Garrett, plugs go.
You can follow me at Twitter at BlaneExplosion, and follow me on Twitch whenever I stream ever. Twitch.tv/BlaneExplosion. I'm also co-host to the Nintendo Shack under the Play Some Video Game Podcast Network. You can support them at patreon.com/PSVG.
Very nice, my friend. As for me, you can find me on Twitter at Ryan Turford. You also find us on Twitter at The RPG Cave, as well as on podcast services around the globe and on YouTube. Again, just search for The RPG Cave there if you want to see our beautiful faces. So, for Garrett Bland, I'm Ryan Turford. This has been episode 8 of The RPG Cave, and we're out.
Bye-bye.